Why do brakes squeal? It's embarrassing, annoying to your fellow cyclists, and it can degrade braking performance. Usually the squealing brakes happen for one of 4 reasons. Your brake blocks are cold. If that's the case, the squealing will go away as soon as the brake blocks warm up on your ride. They have become contaminated. Most often contamination comes from oil picked up from the road or from an overzealous lubing of your bike. If you spill hydraulic brake fluid on your pads or it leaks out of the mechanism, it will contaminate your pads. The pads have become glazed or pitted, sometimes through sustained braking or riding your brakes on long down hills. The pads can become polished or glazed. And finally, if your rotors have become contaminated, dirty or rusty. This is often the culprit after riding in wet conditions, muddy conditions, or putting your bike away wet. Simple fixes. You're out on a trail and your bike begins to squeal. Often riding through a patch of mud can fix the issue. Putting some mud across the brake pads and onto your rotors and then gently braking will often be enough to get rid of the problem. Good housekeeping. Simple housekeeping or basic maintenance can save you a lot of time and effort in the long term. After a messy ride, wash your bike down with a bucket of soapy water and a hose. Get a clean rag and wipe your bike dry. This can stop the surface rust from forming. Make sure your brakes are clean and dry. Your rotors should be regularly inspected to make sure they are straight and true. This is easily achieved with the wheel on the bike. Spin the wheel slowly and listen for any graunching or grinding noises coming from your brakes. If you do hear noises, look to see if the rotors are swaying in the gate. If so, they can be straightened with some gentle persuasion from a set of pliers. Pad removal. Brake pads wear out and should be regularly inspected for wear. Resin brake pads will last more than 500 miles or 800 kilometers if they're looked after, and metal or sintered pads can last almost twice as long. Removing your pads is simple. Straighten the split pin holding the assembly and pull it out. The brake pads and the spreader should then come out. Generally, pads are in 3 pieces consisting of 2 pads and a small wire frame or spreader. Remove all 3 pieces together. Once the pads are out, they can be inspected for glazing, grooving, dirt and wear. To clean the brake pad, you can use a variety of solvents like acetone. Here I'm using isopropyl alcohol. Simply spray some solvent onto a paper towel and use it to clean your pads. I also take the time to clean the whole assembly while I have it apart. Often a clean like this is enough, but if your pads are contaminated with oil, glazed or grooved, they will need further attention. Burning off oil. If a pad has become contaminated with oil and you want to try and recover them, hold them with a pair of pliers over an open flame. This will burn off or evaporate the oil from the pad. You'll only need to hold the pad over a flame for a short amount of time to burn off any residue. And be aware that pads will be hot for some time after you've done this exercise and will need to cool down naturally. Sanding pads. If your pads are grooved, pitted or glazed, they can be lightly sanded with fine sandpaper. I use P400 wet and dry paper, which I've found works well. Put some of the paper down on a flat surface and rub the block gently across it. You're trying to remove just enough material from the block to get them working again without sanding away too much of the pad. Once you've sanded a brake pad, clean it again with some solvent to remove any of those loose particles. For most situations, even when brakes have been glazed from extended bikepacking trips with long hills, this routine should be enough to get you over the worst squeaks and squawks. Sanding rotors. While you have your bike apart and servicing your pads, take a good look at your rotors. If your bike has been put away wet or left out in the rain for long periods of time, the rotors may have also become rusted. If the pads have become grooved, the rotors may have picked up some deep scratches. Rust and scratches on your rotors will kill your brake pads and definitely cause a lot of noise. The simplest way to clean a rotor is to leave the wheel on the bike and spin it in place. Then use your solvent and paper towel to clean both front and back surfaces. It will take several goes to get rid of the muck and residue build up on a bike rotor. Expect to do it at least 3 times. If you still have marks or rust on your rotors, take your fine sandpaper and sand down the rotors, taking care not to catch your fingers as you sand and rotate. In extreme examples, you might need to pull the wheel off and sand the rotors on a flat surface. But as a basic new rotor can be purchased for $20, you might need to consider whether your current one is worth saving. Pad types. If your pads are too old, too damaged, or simply worn out, you'll need to replace them. There are two classes of brake pads, resin or metal. Resin pads, or organic pads, are made from a mix of fibres held together by, you guessed it, resin. Typically, resin pads are softer, therefore they wear more quickly, but generally make less noise. Metal or sintered pads are made from metal particles fused together. Metal brake pads can perform well under a variety of conditions, deliver sharper braking response and more noise. If you live in wet areas, metal pads are your best choice, whereas resin pads are better for drier conditions as they can deliver a better feel to the rider and a more modulated response. The choice of pad is often quite simple, as it will be written on your rotor. Therefore, changing the pad type from metal to resin or vice versa can also require a change in rotor. If you follow these simple tips, you should be able to eliminate almost all of the squeals and squawks from your brakes, which should deliver better braking performance and a lot quieter ride. If you like this type of content, please give me a thumbs up and leave a comment. It really helps. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.